There are many countries, locations, and places in the game of GeoGuessr, but some of them may be a bit more important to learn than others. For example, small countries like the Netherlands or South Korea are just not as important to learn. This is because as long as you know you're in that country, you're not going to lose really any points no matter where you go in these small countries. But I do believe there are 5 locations that you should know a little bit more than all the others. For example, if you do get a country wrong in Europe, it's not going to be too devastating. But if you are across the entire world, you're going to lose quite a bit more points. So these 5 places are obviously my opinion, and some people may disagree with me. Let me know what you think is the most important place to learn in GeoGuessr in the comment section below. I also will have resources for everything to learn in the description of this video. Make sure to check some of that stuff out after the video is done. But I think it's time to get into number 5, which is rare Google coverage. Rare Google coverage is something that every single high-level player will know where it is. I mean, everything from the obscure Pitcairn Islands, located literally in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Because these places are often limited to only a few spots in a particular country or place, it is very easy to learn. Knowing which island the volcano is in Vanuatu could be a huge advantage and can win you a lot of duels. Rare Google coverage is only number 5 because it doesn't show up very often. But 9 times out of 10, your opponent will know where it is, and you are going to lose if you do get one of these rounds. Most of this coverage uses the Trekker camera and not Google Street View. There are some exceptions, of course, but most of the rare Google coverage that I'm talking about show up quite frequently on the world map and other maps that you regularly play in GeoGuessr. Some of these places include Pakistan, Vanuatu, the Pitcairn Islands, Galapagos Islands, Costa Rica, Madagascar, Egypt, Lebanon, Belarus, Mali, and Martinique. Most players in GeoGuessr have no idea that official coverage even exists in these locations, which will give you definitely a massive upper hand if you do know these places. This also includes places like Donetsk, which as you can see here is kind of isolated from the rest of Ukraine with no Google coverage around it besides in the city here. So if you do get Donetsk and you know what to look for and you know where you are, you could have a huge advantage, but also be at a huge disadvantage if you don't know it. And so because of all these reasons, rare Google coverage is ranked at number 5, because if you do get around and you don't know it, you're probably going to lose the duel or lose massive points in whatever game mode you are playing. The best way to learn, honestly, is just to do what I'm doing right now. Hop in the game and actually just walk around, move around, look at what you're looking at, see what's going on, so you can recognize it if it pops up later in your future games. Number 4 is along the same lines as number 5 in that you could lose some serious massive points. In fact, that's a pretty common trend in all the locations here today. But number 4 is the Arctic Circle, Greenland, Northern Canada, and some places even in Alaska. I have heard in the GeoGuessr community that some pros even rank Greenland as the most important country/territory to learn in the entire game. I only have it at number 4 just because not everybody knows their Greenland, but you definitely want to know the most common ones that do come up. Unfortunately for all your GeoWizard fans, and honestly myself, it is pretty much all car meta dependent and when you're in Greenland, Northern Canada, and Northern Alaska. But if you want to know these things, it's super easy to find out because pretty much every city in Greenland has some sort of different car, different trekker, different clue in the actual meta camera itself, which I know what you're saying. There are some pretty unique cars out there like this one, which is on a tractor of some sorts, which is actually quite cool. But if you ever wonder how somebody knew some random obscure Greenland town when you're watching a YouTube video or something, they probably knew the car meta and just instantly knew it was that town. That is what almost all of the high-level GeoGuessr players know. They memorize all this stuff. No, same thing with Northern Canada and same thing with Alaska. They are pretty much all car dependent, which kind of sucks. It kind of brings the fun out of learning, but you got to do it if you want to get better. Now, Greenland is at 4 because it shows up a lot more than it does the rare Google coverage. So you will see Greenland quite frequently in your games, and Greenland is huge. You could lose absolutely massive points if you get the wrong side of Greenland if you don't know what town you're in, which can really suck if you get that in high multipliers. It's pretty much going to be GG's in any duel that you're in if you don't know these things. Recognizing places like the northernmost part of Alaska is also pretty helpful because there's not much coverage up here, and it's honestly pretty recognizable when you are up here, which can be quite good. The best way I think to learn these things is just to play and just to kind of memorize, the Shrek ears. Where is that from? What city is that from? And just kind of keep playing and keep playing and keep playing. Practice really is the best way to learn these type of things. In place number 4, the Arctic Circle. Coming in at number 3, we have Far Away Islands. I didn't include these things as rare Google coverage in the 5th spot because, quite frankly, they show up quite frequently in the game. You're going to want to know what the U.S. Virgin Island red car means, and you're really going to want to know when you're on the island of Bermuda. Because as I keep saying, if you go Cocos Island on Christmas Island and you're scrambling last second to get a guess in, but you run out of time, you are going to lose quite a lot of points and probably lose the game. Sad face. Places I would consider far away islands are Reunion Island, Guam, Northern Mariana Islands, Christmas Island, Cocos Island, Midway Atoll, Bermuda, the U.S. Virgin Islands, the 4 islands that make up the American Samoa, the Caribbean islands of Providencia and San Andres. Places like the Canary Islands and the Azores in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean also are going to cost you quite a lot of points if you don't know them, as well as the entire state of Hawaii of the United States of America. Okinawa of Japan is also quite different from the rest of Japan, and knowing the vibes of Okinawa can really help you out in a duel. Now, there are a lot of big countries in the game of GeoGuessr. In the 2nd spot, I think we have the 2nd most important country to learn in the game, and that, of course, is Australia. Australia is a massive country, but most importantly, it's very learnable, which means your opponent is definitely going to know what state we're in. And because the population exists along the entire coast of Australia, selecting the wrong coast could mean your demise. If you take a look at the coverage of Australia on Google Maps, as you can see, it kind of falls along the population of the country. Most of the roads, most of the coverage is on the eastern side in Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, and also in the Adelaide region, which is on the eastern side of South Australia. Once we get into the west, it's pretty much a barren wasteland. Look at this huge amount of space in the middle between Western Australia and Alice Springs. There's like nothing here. Really, most of the coverage in Western Australia is around the Perth region, which is why in Australia, I think the most important place to learn is Western Australia. If you know when it is Western Australia and when it isn't Western Australia, that's going to be very, very important in getting points on the board, and more importantly, not losing points when you are in Australia. The next important thing I would learn is Northern Territory, because it is actually very recognizable. It's fairly easy to learn Northern Territory, and especially a place like Alice Springs, which is right here in the middle of the country. This road that runs from Alice Springs all the way up here till Darwin is definitely worth poking around and seeing what's going on here. Otherwise, the Darwin region is fairly recognizable. Most of your opponents will be able to recognize both Western Australia and Northern Territory 80 to 90% of the time. The other states can be a bit of a 50-50 situation, and that's why I would say learn those after you learn these two. If you're watching me, you probably already watched Zigzag. You guys know that he is very good at Australia. Highly recommend watching his video on his definitive guide to Australia if you really want to learn as much as you possibly can about this beautiful country. Now, before we get into number 1, I want to take a look at a couple of honorable mentions that unfortunately could not make the top 5, but I think if it was a top 8 list, these 3 places would definitely be on it. The first one is actually Indonesia. Indonesia is a deceptively large country. The islands are quite far away from each other, and because of that, you could definitely lose some points if you choose the wrong one. As time goes on, more and more research is being done with Brazil. Historically speaking, Brazil has been a very difficult country to guess, but there have been a lot of new discoveries that have made Brazil quite a lot easier. And finally, the last honorable mention is Canada. You may think Canada looks the same throughout the entire country, but it's actually not true. There are a lot of differences depending on which province that you are in. And I would definitely say that Canada is a lot easier to learn than the United States, which makes it a bit more important to learn. But now I think it is time to get into the number 1. And finally, what you've all been waiting for, the number 1 thing to learn in all of GeoGuessr is Wisconsin. Okay, wow, I am losing subscribers at a rapid speed. It was a joke. It was a joke. I apologize. The actual number 1, of course, is Russia. I can tell you with certainty that 80% of the duels that I personally lose is because I don't know my Russia, and I'm always losing out to rounds to people on Russia. Every single high level player, every single pro in this game knows their Russia very, very well, and can at least get a very good region guess or potentially even the right road. Even if you can't read Cyrillic, which I cannot, I'm sure you cannot either, you can still get good guesses in on Russia based on a few different factors. I highly recommend at least getting vibes or at least getting some clues to what Western Russia looks like and what Eastern Russia looks like, because you could lose quite a lot of points if it is the opposite one. There are definitely certain specific regions you want to know over others. For example, the far reaches of Murmansk, the Mirny fire smoke coverage, and in general, most of the very far eastern locations of Russia. If you do know Cyrillic, it can be a huge advantage. For example, in this game where my opponent was able to read what city that we are, and I'm just kind of floundering around trying to figure out something to go off of, and there's nothing to go off of because I cannot read. I will say that Russia is very, very intimidating to learn, so I don't blame you if you put it off. I've even put it off myself. It, of course, is the biggest country in the world, and unfortunately, it's very horizontal, meaning that the landscape kind of looks the same throughout. In Chile, it's very vertical, so the landscapes look quite different the further south and the further north that you go. But in Russia, it can kind of all look the same. I highly recommend checking out the links in the description for Russia to kind of help you out a little bit, get some basic clues just so you're not completely lost like I am usually. And there you have it, folks. Those are my top 5 most important things to learn in GeoGuessr. Let me know if you disagree. Let me know if you agree. I think that anything that provides massive point loss potential is important to learn, and I think I gave you all 5 of those things. Some of them are a lot easier to learn than, of course, others. So yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. See you, everybody.